Let's begin. It doesn't work. Which button to press? Press it down. It doesn't work. It's broken. Yes, it works. So, a bit of advertising. Join the PosiDev channel, Positive Technology about secure development. So, we have the time. Yeah. We're going to tell you about SCA scanners. It's about the SCA software composition analysis process. And Bobelko Victor, it's me in Raiffeisen Bank. I am going to make our software secure. I am Dmitry Evdokivanov from Lantry Company. We secure images, containers, and Kubernetes environment. So, SCA is well known, so we have a lot of articles about it. We have a lot of tools. In our presentation, we're going to touch upon that, but initially, when we started to talk about something about SCA, no one ever evaluated the SCA process by a certain methodology. And we chose the CMMI methodology, and it's very well to describe any business processes that might exist in the company. For example, you can evaluate how payment is going on in your financial department, or how you carry on loads if you are railway transport. And we decided to apply CMMA to SCA methodology. We shall describe the headaches at each maturity level and what shall we do to raise our maturity level. Well, SCA, software composition analysis. What for? Why? Right now, most of the developers, up to 80% of the code, take from somewhere. They do not write it from scratch, and they do not fully understand what is contained there. SCA helps you to realize what kind of libraries, what kind of dependencies are used. For example, Maven Top in POM, kernel to build safe, and so on and so forth. Dependency. If you take a Docker image, it's split into levels and compare hashes with vulnerability databases. And then our tool should offer the version that we have to use to fix this vulnerability. It's in Avast 2021. You heard about it in 0.6. All libraries should be carefully tested and checked for security. So you can have vulnerabilities in open source libraries, in dependencies. Then we take some images from open source registries, Open Hub, for example. You can take it from a certain registry, add your own business logic, and you get the final image for our service. And it has to be tested for security. After February 24 last year, you had a lot of protestware, a lot of malware, then dependency confusion, and a lot of supply chain attacks. Let us look at CMMI, capability, maturity, model integration. It's a model of maturity and improvement of business processes. IT security is also a process, and the methodology contains a number of recommendations and practices which are necessary to reach a certain level of maturity. The purpose is to understand what kind of actions we have to take for our process to become better. And since we have a tail should always have the main hero. And we took our Grugu, who is going to grow and develop, stepping up from one maturity level to the other. So let me tell you about CMMI maturity levels. We have 5 of them. Level 5 is just outer space. It's too much. When the process starts, it is not formalized. It's chaotic, it's reactive, it's unpredictable. So it's chaos. One black box, no requirements, and we don't understand what is actually happening. Level 2. Standard level of processes. This is already not bad. The process is described and it can be reused, but we try to improve it, we try to tune it. We see a lot of drawbacks there, a lot of metrics are missing, and we don't have full-scale control. Requirements are defined, but they are not properly controlled. And actually, we look certain areas. One area may be good, the other is just unknown. We have small black boxes in the entire picture. The standard third level of maturity. This is very, very good. You are great. You have the process and it is standardized. This standard exists, it's described, it works inside the organization. It describes all the dependencies and you know what has to be improved. Step by step, point by point, you looked inside your black boxes and understand them. Level 4 is almost top. You start evaluating it, you have metrics to calculate and see how the process is executed. We can evaluate the quantity and the quality. And we see that this is predictable. Level 5 is excellent. Everything is available. We know absolutely everything. We have exact characteristics. We implemented all the best practices, but I haven't seen it anywhere yet. Let's go on. Why do we need it? What for? Who asked that question? Let me explain. By evaluating the process, we always realize how efficiently we work, and we can prioritize our further actions. We have to abandon the paradigm that it's the people who are responsible for everything. If a person is to blame, it means that the process doesn't work. And of course, the quality of products should go up, and the security should go up. That is clear. So, we are at the bottom. I am not going to tell you how to install SCA. We installed it. We chose it, we compared it, all the criteria tables, procurement. Of course, procurement may take up to 9 months, but scenarios are not clear. We don't know how we are going to use it, what kind of scenarios we may have. If we take shift left concept, as soon as we download a library from the internet, we have to test it in net firewall and understand whether we use it or not. Or we take a Docker fab image and see how many vulnerabilities are there and blah blah blah. For example, if we have a final image of our microservice architecture, we can see point by point what has to be checked. So these are examples of scenarios, but we don't have any of them. There is no general approach to usage. Some use it for the final image, some of them don't know anything about the tool. So it's one big black box. So low level of awareness of the process. Many teams don't know about SCA at all. Awareness is 20% of IT security. So otherwise you wouldn't have any results. And when we install SCA, we look for the most interested tools, the most progressive, the most interested ones, the most advanced, and they already have some dependency checks. And when we install, we connect them and continue working with them. We don't have the time for all the rest. And most of the teams do not even know about SCA, they are not aware of it. So vulnerability, it works. So I have 1,000 vulnerabilities or just a few. So what? Of course, I had the record of 3,000 vulnerabilities. Maybe someone had more. Now, what do we need to reach this second level? We have to describe the usage scenarios. They can be different. Most people start from the shift right. We have the final Docker image. Let's have a look. What is inside? That is good. If everyone use the same rules, describe it. Don't try to do everything at once. Work in a step-by-step manner. Then you define requirements. For example, we have to fix all the vulnerabilities of high severity and critical severity, if there is a fixed version. This is also a requirement, because for some vulnerabilities there are no fixed versions. You know that. Then you have to inform the developers about the process. Bring all the IT people together, 20 teams, 30 teams, and demonstrate the tool, how to work. Please record that as a video. Show that video in your intranet. Repeat it again and again. People should be aware of what you have. And then, of course, at this stage, you have to install IT security control, at least in some points. And this is level 2, which is not bad. But still, we see low quality of vulnerability triage. The teams do not understand what has to be fixed and what can be omitted. They come to OPSEC and say, well, we have 1,000 vulnerabilities, what do we have to do? Then irrational use of OPSEC resources. Some teams said, we launched your tool, please carry out the triage yourself. This is wrong. This shouldn't be done. because a certain person cannot work for all the developers. He will just go to another company. So the percentage of how many teams use the tool, it's all right. SCA is not a standard for development yet. It's very often the developers inside the company have certain standards. For example, use CI/CD, auto tests, secret management in a centralized way, or maybe the usage of a Kuber cluster. This is standard. This is something which every employee of this company should do. SCA is not in that standard yet, but we are striving for that. And we still have a lot of vulnerabilities in typical cases when many teams come to you and have the same vulnerability, the same, and this can be cured. Let's go to level 3. Level 3 is very good. What do we have to do to reach that level? To define responsibility level. The teams should triage their own bugs for themselves. They come to AppSec only when they fixed something, but it failed. So at version 4.0 it worked. The tool says refresh to 4.6. We refreshed. The vulnerability went away, but everything, all the functionality crashed. Then in that case, okay, we may say let's work together and for the time being use the previous version. Install basic golden images. This is a tool to fight against typical vulnerabilities. Golden basic images. For example, make such images for Python, for Java, for different Java versions. Something that really works. It's important when we install basic golden images to take requirements of all the teams and include all the most popular libraries there into that image. Then those images should be supported because we have more and more vulnerabilities, the tools are refreshed, renewed, and you have to update your images and then convince your teams that they have to use such images, and we have to control that. Look at the registries, who is using what. This is a separate big subject to manage and control. Then offer the service of connecting to SCA. Security should be convenient. If it takes a lot of time and effort for the sake of assessing security, and then you have to read the description, then nobody is going to use your tool. You all use bank applications. QR code, and then press the button and pay. So security is also a service, and it should be convenient. The service should be convenient, and think about it by all means. Then simplification of vulnerability triage. The teams should have good support. For example, your tool or your service shouldn't reflect the vulnerabilities which do not have fixes, because people will come to you and ask, is there a proof of concept or not? Is there a fix or not? You will waste a lot of time for that. Because if you cannot fix, So, what can you do? And then when we did all that, you can install quality gates. For example, through the pipeline, the image goes on and passes through the gate. If the maturity level is not less than 7, it's up to you to define. And then information security control of all the teams. I wrote all, but 85% is also good enough, because some of the teams do not have internal development, some of them use vendor product, so not all the teams, but 85% of the teams is just enough for level 3. We reached level 3, but at level 3 we don't have metrics of the process and reporting, quantity, quality, so you have to start deploying them. And teams do not quite understand how to triage vulnerabilities, what to do with false positives, because you don't know that it is false. Then vulnerabilities without fixed versions, please don't demonstrate them. And then transitive dependencies. What do you do with transitive dependencies? Yes, nothing. This is the right answer. Don't do anything. For some of the people, transitive dependencies, for example, this package works with this hardware only. For other teams, it can be different, so you have to decide. And then we have to try to show the value of this practice for business. We have to understand how to sell it, why it is important. So we are at level 3. This is a very, very good level. However, it would be wrong for me not to try to reach even higher. And when we discussed this report with Dmitry, he said, I'm going to tell you what is next. And I give him the floor, who is going to tell you what's coming next. So we have a lot of vulnerabilities. They are different. They are complex, and to go higher, let's look at processes, but also with the complex things that you may meet in the process. Let's start with the problem. You have all of that. You scanned a lot of vulnerabilities, 4 of them here. Sometimes you can have 2,000, 3,000. It's normal practice. If you take the latest version of the basic Ubuntu image, you will have more than 100 vulnerabilities. What are you going to start with? Criticality. What is critical, what is high, what is medium, what is low. Usually we look at critical high, and that's all. When I was a tester, sometimes when the project was coming to an end, we took low and medium vulnerabilities and tried to exploit it. And we carried out proactive tests, and sometimes we compromised the system coming from low and medium vulnerabilities. Low and medium are still vulnerabilities and problems, and which can give you bad results. Criticality, well, we have to cover CVE 1, 2, and 3, But let us move on. Is there a patch? Is this a vulnerability of your application or a basic image? Is it your internal or is it external? If it's your internal application, is it hard or is it Linux with security policies? Well, vulnerabilities with the level of criticality cannot tell you much. You have to realize whether they affect your business or not. You cannot just give it to somebody else to try it. He will give you thousands of vulnerabilities and exploits. You have to see whether there is an exploit, really, and how easy or how difficult it is to use that exploit. Then what is the environment? Is it in the internet or not? Is the container rooted or not? Is the system behind security contexts and security policies, or is it just in the externally faced system? Then you have to evaluate and prioritize it. I had cases when security services at level 3 of maturity applied wrong criticality level. We had a patch, we wrote an exploit for the second day, but the bank said that they had 3 days to close the vulnerability, but we could exploit it on day 2, not on day 3. So it required higher criticality level. So the pass through from level 3 to level 4 includes that we have to pay attention to vulnerabilities. Moreover, exploit programs paid for exploits, not for vulnerability as such. We have to look at what may happen next. Are there any other mitigating measures? What is the environment? If we just try to involve developers for each critical vulnerability. But additional information about hardening, about environment, if it is not your internal application, if it is externally faced, then you have to fix it. It's a good field for interaction with developers. So it's very nice to evaluate the context, to see where it works. Are there any mitigating tools? What is the environment? In my practice, there were cases when Log4Shell worked in the wrong way, and our customer, a bank, as often it was in Java, as usual for banks, and QBX microservices were hardened with network policy. It's Kubernetes firewall, native. And so the vulnerability was exploited, but hackers couldn't do anything more. So they couldn't harm the bank. Interesting. So they fixed it. Of course, it was available for external exploitation, but no one could hurt the company. It's interesting. In the West, there is an approach called cyber sounds culture. The task is not to close all the vulnerabilities, which is impossible. You will always have some. Cyber stability is that through those vulnerabilities, a hacker couldn't harm the customer. Sometimes security people harm the bank more, because while he is fixing, everything doesn't work. But if a hacker cannot harm the bank, so much the better. So the business is secure. Let's move on. Again, is everything going on according to the plan? First, we detect a vulnerability by the developer. So we have an open source library in GitHub, and there is a vulnerability there. At this point, when the developer detects a vulnerability, it already works in the prod. Very often, a community faces a problem and discusses it in open comments. And there are other companies which build their business on discussing commits, fixes. At that point, they know already about the vulnerability which can be exploited. At conferences, I hear very often that bug bounty people at Chrome look Chrome logs, and they just analyze everything that is open, and they find exploits before the version is already in production. So they already have an exploit ready. The developer learned about the vulnerability, it develops a patch, it takes time. After that, a CV is registered, then different scanners, open source, commercial ones, refresh their database, but your environment is still vulnerable. Then your scanners are launched. They cannot find this vulnerability in real time. You have to refresh your, update your database, then scan, then produce a report. So you have to tell your developer that there is an exploit. But the developer has his own job. It will take a week or two, depending on his priority. And if we recall about certified software, and there are windows of renewal, and some software pieces are updated once a quarter, then it will be updated, tested, all the quality gate tests. It will take time. Sometimes I hear that update is not done by a press of a button, or sometimes some functionality doesn't work at new versions. Then maybe there are people who install it in prod, but first we launch it in test environment, then a pre-prod environment, and then in production. How much time does it take? For all that time, our environment is vulnerable. Usually, from patch to exploit, it takes from several hours to 2 to 7 days. I know very few companies that can fix the bug in 7 days. Sometimes several weeks, months, more than 7 days actually. But people who specialize in exploits, they have dark nets, they are specialized in PHP, in Java, and they can give you an exploit in several hours. You give him the patch, and he gives you an exploit. When you refresh your feed, he already has the exploit. But of course, some other vulnerability appears. I tell you about one vulnerability, and you may have 3,000 in one image. And this is the picture. And not a single person can work in such environment. So vulnerabilities, how many of them are registered daily? I don't know. If you use open source vulnerability scanners, they are updated once a day or once in several hours. This is the picture. And remember, how long did it take to fix Log4Shell? It started in November, it ended at the end of December, because they patched in the wrong way, bypass was found, and our developers fixed that library instead of doing their own business, because that library was very popular. Let's install a security policy, then the product will fall down. At the moment of SCA scanning, you have zero vulnerabilities. It goes to prod, you refresh the feed, and you will have a security gate that critical vulnerabilities are not allowed. But you scale up, you change from one node to the other, and because of security gate, they cannot go through because some critical vulnerability was found. You cannot block it altogether. Transition from level 4 to level 5. We said that sometime you will be broken and compromised, and you cannot reach zero vulnerabilities. Therefore, zero trust approach is good. In microservices, for instance, where you can cut off all that is unnecessary, take something binary, codes with frontal policies, network policies, like Log4Shell. But no matter how hard you try, you will still have a lot of vulnerabilities, and not only IT security should do creative work, but all the rest too. But if you don't like your employees, they will deal with vulnerabilities all the time on a 24/7 basis. Zero trust helps you to focus on something creative and interesting. business gets a lot of useful things. We say that there is no business risk, but take it, include it in your pipeline. In the modern world, when we have a lot of vulnerabilities, we have to switch from reactive to proactive security. Business impact is what is paramount. If a hacker cannot impact your business, so everything's all right. So Kubernetes can provide you a lot of good things. Now we are coming to an end. So we are at level 5. Now, what kind of conclusions can we make? What was the title? To make you understand the methodology, how we can grow from one maturity level to the other. The simple inclusion of SCA pipe into your pipeline doesn't give you anything. You have to support the developers. They must get a workable, convenient tool that they can use and do whatever we need. But the triage is their business, not yours. Otherwise, you will die in your foxhole. So it's our service, and we offer it to developers. At level 4, Dmitry offers a solver or a calculator. Oh, Crete, forbid it. But think, we have a lot of solvers. Dima offered one, you may have another one, but without prioritization, you cannot solve the problem. SCA is not a silver bullet. It doesn't guarantee a lack of incidents, and we don't have a button that could solve the problem. At this point, we would like to finish it. Use this QR code. Now we are ready to answer your question, and you can find us today or tomorrow. Are there microphones? Yes, Dmitry. Victor, thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. The red lines, yeah. No matter how hard you try, you will be hacked. The question is about risks. So developers must be allowed to work. You shouldn't break the business. Everything should be green at the business level. How do you find the balance? How do you assess risks? You work with banks. If I assess the risk in the wrong way, I will be all the red. How do you balance my interest and their interest? Let me answer the question. First of all, in the bank, we have a good practice like risk assessment. And our AppSecs try to find the impact which a potential hacker must get in your application. If there is no such impact, it's green. If there is such an impact, we have to fix it. And then what kind of impact? For example, to fix the bug, it will take 10,000 ruble, but it will bring you 10 million. Business says, well, we are ready to take that risk. We're going to block that 10,000 rubles, but we must have this product in the production environment. So we always assess the business impact. Money, of course, in terms of money. Yes. Hello, Sergey, Gazprom Bank. The question is to you. You rejected the analysis of a certain component. Why? Because SAS gives us transitive. Yes, of course. It's a debatable issue. It's controversial. We discussed a lot about it. Sometimes transitive is hard fixed to a certain environment, and you cannot change the version. It works with this version only. When the transitive is directive for another component, and there is a possibility to do something about it, it's another approach. It's individual approach from one team to the other. If you generate such service for SCA in your database, you have to mark that in this team it can go, in the other team it should be stopped. But this is creative work, non-trivial work. It requires a lot of analysis. Well, when everything is fixed, then it is fixed. Yes, and you have to spend a lot of time on that, and you can spend it on other, more prioritized tasks with greater priority. But you have to evaluate that. We have a good team which evaluates all that, prioritizes all that, and does the job. Please give the microphone. Yes, thank you for the presentation. It was rather interesting. You said that upset should not triage transitive vulnerabilities. Example, you have a vulnerability in a popular library, which later on goes to microservices, 1,000 microservices. And in this paradigm, triage will go to 100 developer teams. And you, an AppSec, may say, it's not valid in your frame. Is it cheaper for the company, for you, to do the job? Who decides that this should be triaged by the company, this is triaged by me? Because it's easier for the company to spend 1 hour of your time rather than 100 hours of 100. No, I am not talking about this. This is good, everything is clear. It was closed in 1 hour, just 1 hour. I'm talking about a different vulnerability. We're tracking them. Medium severity, it comes to you. Well, vulnerability, we have thousands of them. And if we sit down and discuss each and every, we shall die. If everything loud comes in, we'll look at GitLab, we'll look at how POCs are operated and what we can do with them. For example, we have a person who works with WAF in an excellent way. He can close it very quickly because we realize that these internet-faced applications will be closed at WAF, and then the teams will use them in their technical docs and refresh. Critical or high. But if our people assess everything, well, they don't have the time for that. But then the vulnerability will reach the developer without being touched by you. Do you have a fixed version? If there is a fixed version, then they will have to fix it before product. Whether it's valid for the company or not, we shall check and see. If they insist that this is a false positive, then so be it. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I have a question about, well, one question to each of you. One, do the developers have to fix vulnerabilities in the golden images that you mentioned? And are they going to be forced to do that? And the second question, you have a case, you have a vulnerable thing and a fix. And what should be the balance? Or the team may come to you and say, you are security specialists, we cannot refresh because there is a protestware there. Can you fix it yourself? So what are you going to do? Let me answer from the end. We had a case when we saw that the patch which closes a critical vulnerability, we used Tanzum as a kuber. We found a vulnerability there, and the fixed patch contained protestware. We saw it, so we rolled back, we sat down, we thought about a workaround, and this is the answer to the second question. What about the first question? Basic golden images. Each developer team should not be responsible for the basic image, because at level 3, maturity level 3, we have to generate the matrix of responsibility. Who is responsible for which? Who is the owner of the bank, of the golden image? We have different communities in the bank. PHP communities, Java communities, and they have to trace and track the updates of basic images. Then we have to demand from the team from what they introduced in their release. Did I answer the question? Still, the companies are different. The basic image can be developed by the platform team. Who is the owner? He will do that. Sometimes security department is responsible for them. Then it's their business. But usually the department which offers this as a service is responsible for that. Yes, you have to support them and keep them in an actual state. Hi. Thank you for the presentation. It's about, the question is about level 5. When Dima talked, but the question is to Victor. Dima showed us network policy, isolation, hardening. It looked well, but Victor, in your example, you mentioned WAF. Let me specify, there are a lot of bypasses and workarounds. WAF is not a silver bullet. Nothing is a silver bullet. Security is a complex thing. I showed you some examples. He showed you examples. It would be nice to see do 1, 2, 3, and then feel secure. If WAF would be secure, then we would say this is a great thing and you can protect yourself and do nothing else. WAF vendors say exactly the same. But we realize that this is not true. There are a lot of workarounds, a lot of bypasses, and some bypasses are very cute. Well, it was just an example. So the time is up. One last question. Valery. Yes, Valery, you're welcome. Hi, thank you for the presentation. The question is to Victor. You mentioned twice the economic component. And Dmitry also, when talking about levels 4 and 5. But at level 3, you said that you already sell something to business. How do you do economic proofs? It's easy, Dmitry. Log4j, Log4Shell. A lot of companies carried out months of activities trying to fix that vulnerability, find in which components it is used, and the practice of SCA allows you and all of us to so we can and must find very easily to find all vulnerabilities that have to be fixed, and we can sell to business something that the company is not going to use months to find the vulnerability, and we're going to continue supporting business feature. So, and you can take it. Did I answer your question? Thank you. So, who asked the question to me? He asked the best question. So, please go and take your gift.